What a morning! This is what I feel like saying. Forum Pulire is an extraordinary lab of ideas, suggestions and encounters. Savelli, then Barbareschi, then an anthropologist, Janine Merkel-Perelstein from the US, with her experience, her competence and skills to the service of companies. Let's now move on, and now we will be talking to you about business and lady female entrepreneurship, and we do it with Virginia Tiraboschi, whom I greet and thank. Good morning, good morning. And I feel like saying, casually, she's also a member of the Parliament, of the Senate, actually, for Forza Italia, and she's a long-standing entrepreneur, and she has a wonderful idea. She's had a wonderful idea that it's in the pipeline, it's just developing now, and the idea is to enhance a very important area in Piedmont, the Canavese. Virginia, I'd like you to break the ice precisely like this, because we would like you to walk us through all your different milestones of a lady doing business. Yes, thank you, Andrea, for this invitation. So just a couple of words of what my life has been like. 25 years in public administration, then someone might say, well, you're very well settled. It is a very distinguished position, a director of the region of Piedmont. You stay there until you retire. Whereas I tend to get bored very easily, and I use my imagination recklessly, unbridledly. My idea was to basically resign at 48, and I was working in the public administration with fixed wages, and it's an important message, it should be understood today, and I decided to become a CEO of an investment fund, focusing on tourism and reclaiming buildings for hotels. Then I started managing a couple of hotels, one in Piedmont and the other one in Sicily. This liaison is actually recurring in my life, and then I'll tell you why when we talk about the Eco Valley project. And then in 2018, just by chance, like Andrea was saying, I was elected to the Senate. You see, I had never been a politician in my life, and therefore I had to leave my post as a CEO of the fund, investment fund. But I thought I can't really depend on politics fully, and so I decided to establish a business focusing on well-being, cosmetics, and a distribution platform, B2B and B2C, of lotions and moisturizing lotions that are tailor-made for me with the brand of my company. And this is my business as an entrepreneur. And then, you see, I've always tried to be serious in everything that I did. And I've always tried never to be light-hearted in what I did, and thinking that I had the luck of being elected to the Senate. I said to myself, there has come a time in my life when I need to give something back to this area, to this community in Ivrea, the city of Ivrea in Canavese, where there are some plants. There are iconic plants, for example, the Olivetti plants, iconic from the architectural point of view. And I started off with this fantasy that I've always had in my life, in both human and professional life. And then I will tell you why, if I can have some little more space to tell you a little bit about myself. So I said to myself, what kind of projects, what kind of purpose can these plants have? You see, we already are in the 21st century, we are beyond internet, the fifth industrial revolution. So this project must definitely focus on digital and sustainability, environmental sustainability. And in 2018, I was already talking about this at both at the Parliament and at the Senate, and not many understood me, and actually they thought I was foolish. Well, now it is very topical. If you take a look at the national plan for the resilience and rebirth, you will see that among the macro areas of concern, that are absolutely in line with European policies. You have sustainability, environmental sustainability, decarboning, and all this topic linked to the environment, the climate, and at the same time the digital industry. So I have to say that thanks to the cooperation of two further women, coming from two completely different backgrounds than me and also different ages. One of them is close to 70 years of age. The other one is my junior by 10 years. So we basically have implemented this project. It's already well known across the nation, and it is also draws a lot of attention. It's called Eco Valley. It's the first human digital lab where we would like to develop. Well, actually, the business plan has already been drafted, so something really concrete and pragmatic, and it is not just a plan we are still talking about. It is a plan that is in line with the ideas of development and recovery of our country. One thing I wanted to ask you, since the fil rouge of this session are women, you mentioned two women who are your partners in this project. Could you have done this with two men? Is this just by chance? Well, I want to say straight away that I do not think that there is competition between the male and the female world. I'm not a feminist. I want to say it beforehand. I think that these are two different but complementary universes. But one thing should be said. You see, man, well, and I say this as an entrepreneur and as a CEO, and it was a very interesting experience professionally for me. Well, men tend to have how can I put it, a more visionary approach, meaning that for maybe men are better than women in envisioning things, but in the execution phase, men get lost. And it's not a secret that if women can have a perfect balance inside herself, also, she also has to deal with her DNA and professional capacities and her life, career and everything. If women can combine vision and pragmatism, or execution, like we call it, she can really do excellent things. And very often women are deprived of vision, and they need to be accompanied and guided and led. So there has always been a pool of smart women who would execute the visionary idea of men. Well, this time I can say and state with pride that the visionary idea came to a woman. Well, it was my idea. And I am someone who self-celebrates herself. Who doesn't like, to self-celebrate herself. I've always preferred to work behind the wings. And I've always done that. I don't like to appear. I prefer to being and to go straight to targets and be pragmatic. But this time it has been acknowledged it was mine. And inside the promotional committee that we established, and I was willing to take a step backwards in this committee and not becoming the president, but instead my generosity, which was the desire to give back to an area that I really want, something that I wanted to be implemented, rather than seeing myself celebrated by a very high-profile committee, because we have entrepreneurs as its members, institutions, the scientific, academic, financial worlds. So it is really a distinguished panel. Well, this time the idea came to a woman, and I executed it with two other women. And I think this is a very strong message for the female world. And if I can add something else now, this feminine world, I would say it is slightly more free compared to many years ago. And also in the way of thinking, in the mindset. if I can say, you see, young women, I want to say to them, have the courage and the pride of your decisions so that you can say, I have done whatever needed to be done, and I have given more than I have gotten. Today, the concept of community in which women must learn to give, not to practice individual leadership, but rather contribute to the birth of diffuse leaderships in communities, I think it is a strong message and a new cultural paradigm on which we need to work. So a bit less competition, I would say, competition among women, and I would suggest a bit more harmony and symphony, because you see, if you are clever, you will come out, you will stand out. There's no need to do anything else. Community acknowledges clever people or people with a genius or talent, innovation capacity that is higher than others. Therefore, she becomes a leader. Whereas today, I see many small leaders and no great leaders. Just a few questions from my jotted down notes. So based on what you were saying, you say women are more free now. Is this true regardless of the economic or cultural class? Well, no, it cannot really be regardless of that. We know that women have tried to go out of their way in order to conquer their independence, economic independence. If you want to be free, you need to be economically independent. And you also need to be culturally independent. There are people who, even though they are financially self-sufficient, let me be straightforward, they're not culturally free. Whereas today, freedom does not mean, I don't know how to put it, does not mean to be less deep, more shallow or more frivolous. No, not at all. More freedom means what I was saying before. It means pride and courage of one's decisions. And I think that this is a plus. And if every woman can really cherish this and without becoming slave to anyone, well, we know that in life luck plays an important role, but maybe they will reach the target. Maybe struggling more, but they will get there. I'd like to add something more. I come from a very humble family. I remember that my mother, on the second week of the month, she didn't know how to pay rent. So I think I do represent, and I say this realizing that everything is much more difficult, because we as a political class, we are really tackling a time of world poverty we need to deal with, and we need to translate this into political actions that are targeted at really keeping this in mind and trying to accompany social inclusion. But the strong takeaway message is believe in it. And if I can address women with this message, or to young people in general, but actually young guys, they seem to be more fragile, more brittle, whereas women are more structured. Well, anyway, believe in it, be driven. It will take time and hard work, because nothing is given out for free. Sacrifice must be accepted, and it must be some sort of leitmotiv, because things need to be worked for and targets need to be worked for. But if you believe in it, first of all, you can contribute to improving the country in a very concrete manner. And then, in my opinion, you can also achieve results that can be very flattering in terms of professional accomplishment and fulfillment. And they can be considered positive both for the individual and for the community. So for those of you who have been with us from the early morning, the leitmotiv, the fil rouge, is precisely this, is sacrifice, like you were saying, but also humility. These are topics that have been conjured by both Savelli and Barbareschi. And then you told us how you went from the public administration to entrepreneurship. But I'd like to ask you something else. The fact that you are a woman, did this translate into difficulty in your career or not? Well, I have gone through complicated times in my life, professionally speaking. I was married, then I split up with my husband. This was a first trauma. And obviously, since I was part of a family that did not have any kind of contacts or relations, you see, and in Italy this plays an important role in terms of progress. I had to build everything from scratch, relations-wise, and sometimes I sacrificed myself in terms of personal terms, especially when I was younger and maybe less structured. Then, of course, life places you in front of difficult times, you bump your head against the wall. If you're structured, you fall down, but then you get up again. So a resilient attitude, I would say, that is also rooted in my childhood. I was a very neglected girl, and this is another message I'd like to pass on. Although I'm not a mother, I have no children, and like my mother says, since you have no children, you cannot give advice to other mothers, because children need to be taken care of. Well, maybe neglecting them a little bit, and I understand that it's not easy to find the balance, because there are many dangers nowadays that were not there over 50 years ago when I was born. But maybe being a little bit, to be more neglected and less protected under a glass ceiling, it could be really helpful, because I see all these parents running around to accommodate their children. This really is useful to structure these kids, because you need to be structured nowadays. The world is difficult to tackle, and having a specific strength is useful. I just want to tell you a small anecdote on of my childhood. You see, when I was 3 years of age, I would stay home by myself in the evening, and since I was scared when darkness came, what I did was I stepped out a small ladder, and I was 3, mind you, and I would move the arms of the clock between 7 to 8 p.m. Because my mother would come back at that time from her shift, and my father was working double shift to support the family. And I was doing this because I was scared of the darkness, and I wanted my mum to be home straight away. I would dial the phone number of her workplace, and they would say to me, "No, your mum will be back in 2 hours or in 3 hours." And I would go back on the ladder. I would bring backwards the arm of the clock. But you see, the fact that I spent so much time by myself, that strengthened me a lot. And in my case, it stimulated my fantasy and imagination, which is what I was saying at the beginning. I've always been a very creative, imaginative person, resourceful. I've always tried to go beyond conventions and think about out of the box. So my message is unbridle your imagination, because being creative, innovators, daring, and also being disruptive can be very useful. You should not be really standardized in a common way of thinking. There is a standardization of thought, and it is really touching rock bottoming now. Whereas now we need to rediscover the courage and pride of decisions, and also thinking out of the box. Yes, you also need to cherish your ambition and courage. One last question, because still there is the perception that in this country there is a large share of the population, the citizens of the culture, and that have an attitude that goes against entrepreneurship. Is it true? Well, let me say this disruptive event, and I'm talking about COVID-19 and the lockdown, and I say this very sincerely because I side with entrepreneurs. Obviously, I am one of them. So I can't but look at the difficulty tackled by the entrepreneurship. If the state had not been there, it would have been extremely difficult during the pandemic. You see, with my small company, I had to put 3 people in the furlough scheme because during a lockdown, my revenues have a stoppage for 3 months, and unless some superstructure from the financial point of view, and you know that the Italian SMEs are not very structured because it's not so sound and robust from a balance sheet point of view in order to overcome and weather events like this. So the state was important. But what worries me nowadays is the fact that we are gradually drifting towards statalization. And I see this as something food for thought for politics. Because it would somehow oppress a lockdown legacy, and I'll explain myself better. After this lockdown, I think we as Italians, we saw that we have a ductile and flexible organizational capacity. SMEs, of course, in the 20th century, they struggled to internationalize, to exit the borders. We would always look at Germany as if it was the most important manufacturing power in Europe, precisely because it had an extremely robust industrial structure, which we did lack. And today, and I'm saying this because I know many people who work in Germany or German entrepreneurs that I've met along the way. They are very determined and focused on their final target, less words and more facts. Merkel proves this. She doesn't speak very often. When she does, she's very incisive. Well, they are worried by this disruptive transformation on the digital transformation. And on large business, like it is structured in Germany, it could be more complicated rather than in the SMEs, because for its dimensions, its size, it is quicker and ductile in change. So what do I expect? Just to give you an answer to your question, I expect the state to act on an industrial policy based on digital, but then it should let entrepreneurs make their choices. The state should not really have a say in managing the real economy sectors like food, logistics, transport, or building, construction, healthcare, school, and so on and so forth. Today, what I see is a situation whereby there is a lack of balance, and the balance is tilted towards public-run and state-run rather than private entrepreneurship. And nevertheless, they need to understand that the world has changed. And today, also this message, and I'm drawing toward a conclusion, Olivetti's message, who's always been an inspiration for me, a visionary entrepreneur, someone who really looked after the company, the community and the institutions all together for the final target of making the whole community grow. It was a very strong message, and I think that everybody should consider it, because you have to share part of your success with your stakeholders and also give back to the community that made you great. You have to give back part of your wealth. And then, because this comes back again, what goes round comes round. Adriano Olivetti's words is very contemporary nowadays. I'm not being nostalgic about it. It is a very topical and current way of thinking, and today can be done very well in a public-private partnership. But this needs to be a partnership, a constructive one, for growth, cultural, social and economic growth of the community and the country as a whole. So hopefully politics is somehow able to do that, not through a struggle, because I think that struggle is not very useful, but in cooperating on important topics. I see it pretty difficult to implement, but we absolutely need to hope that it can happen.
Allora, Olivetti, avete sentito?
So you heard Olivetti,
era stato
as Tiraboschi said, Olivetti was recalled also by Professor Sapelli. And one last thing that Senator Tiraboschi said is that never like today, pending the structural reforms in the country, is it indispensable to have a partnership between the public and the private. And I think that this really is the backbone of everything that the country needs to do. We need both sides and an alliance. Thank you, Virginia Tiraboschi, for telling us about you as a woman, a female entrepreneur, and also as a member of the Senate. Thank you, and best of luck for everything. Thank you. So, see you in a minute.